Hi, guys. How are you all doing? I hope you had a nice weekend. I appreciate all of you guys for getting your assignments done last week. It made my life a lot easier. I hope you guys are all doing well. First thing, life challenge for this week. Again, post something on social media that you were thankful for that you previously took for granted. And any stories or examples that you want to share that we usually do at the beginning of the class period, I'd love for you to email me those. Another thing, actually, I'm going to add we have a Zoom session on Wednesday and Thursday during your periods. If you miss your class period, just pop into another one. But I will be tracking attendance on that and then see the calendar for the links. And I just need to make those sessions. So they'll be posted on there and I'll email them out as well. So the first thing, open the Mod 57 58 handout, which looks like this. I essentially left a bunch of areas for you to write definitions in and then examples. And so you'll be using this sheet as you go through this video right now. So then we'll talk about Mod 58, and then you guys have your Google form as your summative points. Do it at the end of the week. You guys are going to go into AP Classroom, and there is a personality assessment. Please try to get into AP Classroom today. If you have any issues, let me know and we can get you in ASAP. But you've all been in at some point, so you need your College Board account. All right, so we're talking about personality still. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is the trait theory. So essentially, we've talked about our traits and our disposition and who we essentially are. And so to talk about this, our traits are things that it's how we respond to different situations and how we might do that differently depending on the situation. And so trait theorists look at what behaviors go together, and then they also look at which ones are similar, and then what do these behaviors and traits mean then together. And so essentially what they'll look at is when you're in a situation where you don't really know people, how do you react? Do you go stand in the corner? Do you go try to find someone that's like you? Do you just become the life of the party and talk to everybody? And so that's like extroversion. And so we'll talk about each one of those in a minute. And so there's the different types of trait or personality theories. We have psychodynamic, like people like Freud and Jung and Adler and Horney, and then humanistic, we have like Maslow and Carl Rogers. And then now with trait theory, we don't have as many people as we have different types of tests. So essentially, we're going to look at your traits, not your unconscious mind. And so they'll give people questionnaires. And there's the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and then also the Myers-Briggs test. Some of you guys might have taken this. And so the idea of these are it's useful for predicting your future behaviors. And so the first example we're going to look at is factor analysis. And so factor analysis is essentially the idea that we're going to identify factors that cluster together. And so if you look closely at this chart, you can see that there's different types of extroversion, introversion, unstable, and stable. So Eisnick's uses this personality dimension. This is just one of the other examples like the Myers-Briggs or the MMPI one. And so factor analysis is we're going to give you a list of questions, and each of those questions correlate to one of these factors. And what it does is it kind of gives you a scale of how far you are. Are you right over here? Are you right over here? Way down here? And so that's what a factor analysis does. It analyzes all the different factors that cluster together. And so now what you're going to do is you're going to go to your handout, and what you're going to do is you're going to click this personality test right here. And when you take this personality test, what you're going to do then is you're going to be given the big five personality traits. And so there's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. One of these actually came up on the free response 2 years ago, so I would definitely be aware of what all five of these words mean. And so what you're going to do is an easy way to remember this is the big five personality traits is ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. So right now, pause the video and take this personality test, and then put your scores on this right side. All right. All right. So you're back now. You should have filled out the scores. If you haven't done the definitions, then pause the video right now and fill that out. All right. So the next thing that what you guys are going to, and I guess we can talk about each one of these really quickly. So openness is like being curious, original, intellectual. Conscientiousness is someone that's like extremely organized, very school related. They have a systematic approach to things. They're always on time to class. Extroversion, a lot of you guys know what this is. It's are you outgoing? Do you like to be around new people and different people? Do you thrive off being around others? Agreeableness is essentially like, are you sensitive to others? Are you tolerant to other people? Do you trust people? Are you kind to them? And then neuroticism is essentially like being irritable or being very easily annoyed and moody and anxious. And so that's neuroticism. So you should write those definitions again on your handout right here. And here are, after you take this test, here are my results from 2017. You can pause and take a look at that. And then here are my results from 2020, which are pretty similar to each other if you scroll back and forth. Not much of a change there. You can see the difference. The big change was in agreeableness, I supposedly changed. All right, so what I want you to do is pause this, and these are different quotes from out of your textbook that essentially talk about, do these actually predict our behaviors, which you'll find that they definitely do. So pause the video and read these over. All right, so the big thing that you need to take away from this is essentially what these 5 words mean for trait theory. So what you're going to do to practice is you're going to look and you're going to try to do a essentially Tinder trait theory breakdown. So you're trying to find if someone that's one thing and then someone that's another thing, are they going to be a good match? So high conscientiousness and low conscientiousness. I said it's going to be a bad match because the low partner would always be disappointing the high partner because they are always late. The low partner may also feel trapped by the high partner's controlling their wild spirit. So again, you can argue either side of this. There's no right answer, but essentially you're just going to be applying each one of these. So you guys have 4 practice ones that you guys are going to do. All right. And then the last piece of this, the criticisms of this, essentially that it depends on the person and the situation. I might be very extroverted when I am in a situation where I know a lot of people. But I might be a lot more introverted and not willing to go outside my comfort zone when I have to be around maybe a bunch of other teachers at a conference. But if I'm around a bunch of random people at a football game, I might be very much more likely to do those things. And so we found that because of the person situation controversy, people tend to change their traits depending on the situation, even if they're similar situations, just slightly different. All right, so now we're going to jump to Mod 58. Mod 57 is fairly short, but there is those 5 vocab words to know. So we've talked about this before in the social cognitive theory. Essentially, it's social, our interactions, and then our cognition, our thinking, and our memory, and all of that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at how the social cognitive theory plays a role in how we interact and how our personality is. So what I'd like you guys to do is pause this video and watch the Bobo Dial experiment one more time. We've watched this before. All right, so when we talked about this before, we talked about what perspective this might fit into. And we actually talked about this previously in the behaviorism unit. And so again, that's all of our observable behaviors. And Albert Bandura was one of the people that we talked about, along with John Watson in classical conditioning, Ivan Pavlov in classical conditioning, B.F. Skinner in operant conditioning. You might want to review those because it'll likely come up again in the AP test. All right, so this idea, the social cognitive theory of our personality, emphasizes that our traits interact with our situation. So this is what the trait theorists, this is what they're missing. And so there's observational learning. We learn from what we see, self-efficacy, how much we believe in ourselves, how the situation influences us, and then also our thinking and how that plays a role. So the first idea is the reciprocal determinism. So reciprocal means that, like, if I reciprocate, you gave me a gift, then I'm going to give you a gift back. You say, please, and then I say, thank you. And so in this, we have the person, the behavior, and the environment. All 3 of those interact constantly with each other. And so depending on how the person reacts, the behavior is going to change. Depending on how the behavior changes, the environment around them is going to change. So the example that I typically like to give is road rage. So if I'm on the street and someone cuts me off, my thinking is going to then change my behavior and then likely change my environment. So for example, someone cuts me off. One way is I can think, oh, they might be late. And so therefore I don't get mad. I don't honk. I don't try to drive up right on them. And then the environment is a safe environment. So all those things then constantly are changing, and that's how essentially reciprocal determinism works. But if you're a person more like, I don't know, me, you might honk at the person. You might give them the thumbs down. like we always talk about. Well, now my behaviors towards that person, because my thinking was negative, might cause the environment, the people around me, to maybe be a little bit more worried. Or the person in front of me that cut me off, they might slam their brakes in order to make me slam my brakes, which then causes someone to maybe almost rear end me. And then the situation gets changed person by situation, and everyone kind of works together. So what I want you to do is, I love this video of Friends. It's called the work laugh. So what I want you to do is pause this, and then on your handout, what I want you to do is I want you to fill out how do all three phases work together on the work laugh, and then create 2 of your own original examples. All right. All right. So that's one of my examples. And then here's the answer about the motorist. You can talk about a shy student. Let's imagine that Anna is a shy student who usually keeps to herself. She enters a room on the first day of class. In most cases, she would quietly slip into her seat at the back of the class in order to avoid becoming the center of attention. In this instance, another student at the front of the room boisterously greets Anna and invites her to sit down in the adjacent seat. So on your handout, what I want you to do is write out the cognition, behavior, and that environment all will work interchangeably to change the personality of this shy student. There's the answer you can look back at. All right, so now here's a bunch of vocab words. You might know some of these from previous classes. We've talked about some of these before. So the first word is self-efficacy. And so what you're going to do is you're going to write the definition down on your paper, and then you're going to write down some examples of your own. This is the ability of how much you essentially believe in yourself and think that your efforts are going to make a change. And so there's always the classic examples of like Michael Jordan didn't make the varsity basketball team. He only made the JV basketball team. He believed in himself. He continued to work, and then he became one of the best basketball players ever. Walt Disney was actually fired for a job because he was told he had no imagination. He believed in himself. He believed that if he kept working hard, he'd be successful. If you guys have seen the movie 8 Mile, you have Eminem. Same thing happened with the Beatles, Steve Jobs, and even Albert Einstein. And so essentially, again, self-efficacy is how much you believe that your actions can change what you're doing. And so again, if you're failing a class, do you believe that if you put in your best effort, you will be successful? That would be your self-efficacy. All right. And then we can skip over those for now. All right, optimist versus pessimist. These are words you probably likely know. An optimist has high self-efficacy. They believe that if they work hard, then they will be successful. A pessimist would have low self-efficacy because they believe that they are controlled by their environments. We've talked about similar words to this before, like the locus of control, which we will come back to. So here's some examples in dating. An optimist, oh, I really like her. I think I might fall in love again. The pessimist, on the other end, might say, oh, I really like him. Bring on the pain again. With marriage, here, you can read this one yourself and pause it. I love this one. The pessimist would say, ew, gross, there are ants on my pizza. The optimist would say, oh, yeah, free toppings. All right. And when we talk about excessive optimism, this is actually from your textbook. The idea of when you have too optimistic, you end up being less successful. For example, people who are less optimistic and might have a little bit more pessimistic view, they might work harder. And that kind of is a little bit counterintuitive. But one of the examples from your book talks about Asian Americans express greater pessimism than their Euro-American counterparts. And because of that pessimism, that they don't think they can be successful, that actually causes them to work harder because of cultural norms that they have. And so it's the idea of like, is anxiety a bad thing? A certain amount of anxiety we talked about with the optimal arousal theory does motivate you. It does improve your performance. But when it becomes too much, then that performance drops off. All right. So one of the last things we'll talk about is learned helplessness. We've talked about this before. Essentially, you have an uncontrollable bad event. You perceive that you can't control it. Then you just feel I'm just helpless. So the idea is no matter how much I study, I will never be good at math. So I want you guys to come up with 2 of your own examples. And then remember the elephant example where the elephant was tied to this small rope and small stake when they're a baby. They can't get away from it. And as they grow, they just learn that they can't ever get away, even though, as we all know, this elephant, if it walked away, it would easily just pull this right out of the ground. But they learn that they will essentially not be able to do anything. All right, I love talking about this one. This is a good example, the spotlight effect. We all do this. I tend to do this a lot. We overestimate how much others are noticing and evaluating our appearance, performance, and failures. And so I want you to think about how often do you do this and give me some examples. What I usually do in class is I'll have everyone put their head down. I'll say, raise your hand if you were having a bad hair day. and that others notice and you're self-conscious about it, or something that you're wearing, or something that's like happened, like, a pimple. And then we have you guys then raise your hand. Everyone looks around and they're like, your hair looks completely normal. I had no idea. We rarely notice these things. Um, and we notice it very easily about ourselves, but we don't really notice it about others. No one really cares about what you look like as much as you think they do. So try to care less. There's tons of research on this. I recommend you guys look this up sometime. I can send you a good podcast on this as well. But the spotlight effect plays a role in all of our lives every day. We covered this. All right, locus of control. This goes back to optimism versus pessimism. So locus of control, internal, I have control. I can be successful if I want. An external locus of control, well, my teacher is going to fail me or pass me. My mom and dad are going to either help me or they're not going to help me, and I'm not going to be successful without their help. Internal locus of control is I'm going to do what I can. I don't need other people to help me. If they do, that's great, but it's essentially up to me to be successful. So here's an example that you guys can watch, and I want you to apply this, Joey trying to learn French, to the locus of control and reciprocal determinism. That'd be great practice. I can see both those words coming up on the AP test. It's a minute clip. It's pretty funny. And then a quick review, self-serving bias versus fundamental attribution error. And you're going to stop there. And the last thing you're going to do is you're going to complete this Google form that is linked on your calendar. Sorry, my Chromebook's going extremely slow lately. And so then what you're going to do is you're going to complete the Google form, which I'll also attach up here. Let me know what questions you have. And again, make sure you take time on Wednesday and Thursday to come to our Google Hangout session. It is really important. Hope you're doing well. Let me know what I can help with.